Hey guys! Tonight we step into the shadowed hush of an imperial palace, where flickering lanterns hang from carved beams and whispers drift like smoke along silent corridors. Tonight we'll uncover the legend of a mirror unlike any other mirror, said not merely to reflect your face, but to lay bare the truth of your very soul. Imagine glancing into polished bronze and seeing not your hairstyle or your robes, but the tangled strands of your loyalty, your envy, your ambition. That is the promise whispered in the dark, a soul-revealing mirror hidden within the court itself. And if the story is true, it became a secret weapon of emperors and empresses alike. Do you dare find out how it was done? You won't survive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is on your clock. It's always fascinating to see how a single story links us across so many time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in silence, the kind of silence that fills palace halls long after the day's rituals are finished and the officials have gone. Servants tiptoe past latticed windows. Somewhere a breeze rattles a bamboo screen, and you feel the faint tingle of suspense because you already know this is no ordinary chamber. Hidden within it is the object that drew both reverence and fear. A mirror said to catch not only the surface of your face, but the essence of who you are. In candlelight it gleamed like frozen moonlight, and courtiers swore it could cloud over when a liar approached, or shimmer with brightness when the virtuous stepped close. The origins of such a legend wind back centuries. Bronze mirrors were common across dynasties, cast in delicate molds, polished until you could see yourself almost as clearly as in glass. But this one, this palace mirror, was said to have been forged with rituals and charms, as though the very metal had drunk in whispers of the spirit world. Scholars later called these magic mirrors, where etched patterns on the back somehow appeared in the reflection when light struck just right. Imagine standing before such a thing, your own reflection staring back, and then without warning shapes forming behind you, inscriptions glowing, the sense that someone or something else was peering into your soul. Stories spread quickly in the inner court. Eunuchs murmured that a corrupt minister once tried to stand before the mirror, and his image warped, shadow pooling across his chest like spilled ink. Others said a concubine was exposed when the mirror reflected not her face but the flicker of another lover's silhouette. Was this true? Or just a trick of candlelight and imagination? The uncertainty was exactly the point. In a world where survival depended on favor and suspicion, even the possibility of such a revelation was enough to make the most confident voice tremble. You can picture the scene. An official summoned at night, robes slightly disheveled, sweat beading on his brow. He bows, straightens, and dares a glance at the bronze disc gleaming on the stand before him. Courtiers watch with narrowed eyes, waiting for the verdict, not of words, but of reflection. Does the mirror glow? Does it dim? The official's fate, his reputation, perhaps even his family's future, seems to balance on the shimmer of light across a surface no wider than a serving tray. Of course, a skeptic might laugh. Mirrors are metal, not magic. Light bends, shadows stretch. But in that moment, in that atmosphere of incense and protocol, reason yields to suggestion. Have you ever noticed how, late at night, the smallest creak of floorboards can convince you of ghosts? The palace was no different. The mind fills silence with meaning, and the mirror became a perfect canvas for fear, hope, and manipulation. The whisper of this mirror's presence drifted even beyond palace walls. Merchants sold cheap imitations, travelers carried tales to distant provinces, and poets wove verses about reflections that revealed the heart. In an age without cameras, without polygraphs, imagine the allure of an object that promised to bypass masks and courtesies and go straight to the truth. Perhaps it was only a story, but what a powerful story. It was powerful enough to shape behavior. People walked straighter, spoke carefully, avoided even small lies, just in case someday they might be summoned before that unblinking face of bronze. The deeper you lean into the tale, the more you realize it was never just about metallurgy or optics. It was about control. It was about the subtle, invisible tether between ruler and subject, between belief and obedience. If everyone thought a mirror could reveal corruption, then perhaps fewer dared act corruptly. Whether or not the mirror ever truly existed mattered less than the fact that people believed it might. And so, in the hush of that imperial corridor, you and I stand with a question shimmering before us. Was the mirror a relic of real craftsmanship, or a carefully staged piece of theatre designed to keep courtiers in line? Before we answer, we need to travel deeper into the foundries where such mirrors were forged, into the smoky workshops where artisans hammered bronze until it sang like a bell, into the realm where craft and legend first entwined. Because to understand why the palace mirror haunted so many dreams, we must first understand how something as ordinary as polished metal could be made extraordinary by the right hands, the right rituals, and the right rumors. In a world before glass mirrors filled every room, bronze was the surface of self-recognition. Picture an artisan crouched beside a furnace, bellows groaning, sparks flying against the gloom. Copper and tin flow like molten stars, poured into clay molds etched with patterns only the craftsman knows. As the metal cools, smoke curls upward, carrying with it whispered prayers that this disc will shine, that it will reflect, that it might hold more than a simple image. You can almost smell the tang of metal cooling, feel the rough grit of sand being brushed away from the mold. To the artisan, it's not only work but ritual. Bronze mirrors are cast in hundreds, yet each one holds a chance to capture prestige, or perhaps divine favor. Some are plain, others inscribed with constellations, dragons, or phoenixes. The sole mirror of the palace, if it truly existed, was said to carry a hidden design on its reverse patterns, so subtle they revealed themselves only under flame. Imagine leaning close with a candle, and instead of smooth bronze, you see characters or shapes bloom, as if the mirror itself had secrets to share. Science today would explain such wonders as the magic mirror effect, where micro-engraved designs on the back affect how light scatters on the front. But to a courtier in silk robes, the shimmer looked nothing less than supernatural. How could a piece of metal know your heart unless it was touched by forces beyond? Palace chronicles tell of emperors commissioning mirrors, not only for beauty but for legitimacy. To rule was to claim the mandate of heaven, and what better proof than an object that seemed alive with omens? Some mirrors bore inscriptions promising longevity, prosperity, or truth. Others were rumored to contain tiny fragments of jade, cinnabar, or even drops of blood mixed into the cast ingredients chosen not for metallurgy but for symbolism. And here, you and I might pause. Is this how myth begins? A craftsman adds a flourish, a priest blesses the mold, a patron whispers of its power. Before long, a simple object is burdened with expectation, with awe, with fear. A disc of bronze becomes a vessel of morality. Centuries later, archaeologists still unearth mirrors from tombs, their surfaces dulled, but their patterns intact. Some gleam faintly even after 1,000 years underground. What must it have felt like to lift one in a palace lit only by lamps, to see your face stare back with shadows moving across your features? Wouldn't you feel as though the mirror saw more than your skin? The foundry smoke clears, and the object passes into imperial hands. From here, its journey takes it not just across time but across imagination, for the artisans had given the court not just polished bronze, but a stage upon which belief and fear could dance, and so the question lingers in the heat of the workshop. If the mirror's surface was forged by fire and hammer, was its legend forged by the human heart? And if so, who truly shaped its power, the artisans, or those who chose to believe? Tests of the mirror began in quiet chambers, but soon became a part of palace ritual. Picture the scene. An official summoned after dusk, the lantern set low, the bronze mirror placed upright on a carved stand. He bows, his breath shallow, his heart rattling against his ribs. The emperor or empress sits nearby, their gaze steady, while attendants lean forward, waiting to see what reflection will emerge. Some accounts say the mirror clouded over if deceit lurked within a person's heart. Others swore the bronze gleamed brighter when it faced someone considered pure. Whether true or not, the ritual worked because everyone believed it could. Have you noticed how a stage fright test can make even honest students stumble on easy words? The mirror was a stage fright test raised to imperial stakes. Fail it, and your career or life could crumble. Legends spread of one minister, renowned for his silver tongue, who trembled before the mirror and seemed to fade from its reflection. Whispers said his dishonesty had consumed him so completely that the mirror refused to show his face. Days later, he was dismissed from office. Another tale speaks of a concubine accused of betrayal. When brought before the mirror, her reflection wavered, showing not her jeweled headdress but a shadowy figure beside her. True event or clever rumor? It scarcely mattered. Once such stories took root, the mirror's authority grew beyond challenge. What's fascinating is how fear itself became the mirror's ally. A nervous courtier might sweat, his hands shake, his shadow dance oddly on the wall, and onlookers would gasp, convinced the mirror had revealed something sinister. Like a polygraph centuries before polygraphs, its power lay not in science but in psychology. At times, even emperors played the game. Records hint that rulers used the mirror not only to test loyalty, but to display their own confidence. Standing before it in front of the court, they dared the reflection to betray them, as though heaven itself were endorsing their reign. Imagine the effect on those watching. If the Son of Heaven shone bright, who dared question his mandate? Yet the mirror was not only for spectacle. Behind closed doors, it became a weapon of intrigue. A eunuch might whisper that a rival's image had darkened, planting seeds of doubt. A jealous consort could suggest her opponent had looked away too quickly, proof of guilt. And in a court where reputation was everything, a rumor tied to the soul mirror was almost impossible to erase. You and I can picture the claustrophobic tension of such a trial. A chamber heavy with incense, the air thick with anticipation, and the victim, whether guilty or innocent, forced to look straight into bronze polished so fine it seemed alive. Every flicker of light became an omen, every bead of sweat a confession. It's worth asking, did anyone ever pass such a test with flying colors? Yes. Stories tell of faithful ministers whose images glowed steadily, or empresses whose reflections sparkled as if the mirror rejoiced in their virtue. But perhaps these tales were less about truth and more about reinforcing loyalty. The court loved parables, and the mirror offered endless supply. In this way, the soul mirror became less an object and more a stage for morality plays. Each ritual reinforced the idea that truth could be revealed without words, that even silence had a witness. Was the mirror real in its power, or was it the belief of those watching that gave it life? And so we drift to the next chamber of our story, where the mirror was not simply a test but a pawn in far more dangerous games, where empresses and eunuchs turned its reflection into a weapon sharper than any blade. In the hush of the inner court, mirrors were not only ornaments but instruments of power. When we step into those chambers now, we see more than carved screens and embroidered cushions. We see plots hovering in the candlelight. Empresses, eunuchs, and court factions understood the soul mirror's greatest gift, not truth itself, but the illusion of truth. And illusions, in politics, can wound more deeply than any sword. Imagine an empress seated in her private hall, the mirror positioned beside her as if it were another advisor. Petitioners are brought forward, sometimes ministers, sometimes rivals within the harem. The empress does not raise her voice. She simply gestures toward the polished bronze. Her silence becomes command, and the accused, trembling, lifts their eyes to the surface. Did the reflection flicker? Did shadows swell where none should be? Observers whispered interpretations before the accused could even open their mouth. The empress, meanwhile, remained serene. She didn't have to accuse anyone herself. The mirror did it for her. Eunuchs, those ever-watchful servants of the throne, also wielded the legend to their advantage. Bound to neither clan nor lineage, they thrived on secrets. One might whisper that he saw a blotch of darkness upon a rival's reflection, planting suspicion in the emperor's ear. Another could insist the mirror shone brilliantly when a trusted ally approached, reinforcing loyalty. Because eunuchs moved between emperor, empress, and ministers, they were uniquely positioned to manipulate what the mirror revealed. In their hands, rumor became verdict. For the courtiers, every glance into bronze was a gamble. If your reflection looked ordinary, perhaps no one noticed. If it wavered, if the candle sputtered at the wrong moment, you might find your name whispered in the corridors. And once the mirror was invoked, how could you defend yourself? Deny the testimony of light itself? Even to argue too strongly made you seem desperate. Some stories tell of entire factions rising and falling on such performances. A favored concubine accused another of betrayal. The mirror was brought in, and when her rival's reflection seemed dimmer, the case was closed. Ministers fell when rivals insisted their images clouded. Those who benefited insisted the mirror was impartial. Those who lost dared not speak against it. In this way, the mirror was more than a piece of bronzite, was a mask worn by power. What fascinates you and me is how the court accepted such theatre with straight faces. In a world of scrolls, seals, and edicts, truth was rarely about evidence. It was about performance, about symbols everyone agreed to respect. The soul mirror became one such symbol. To question it outright would be to question the emperor's wisdom, or the empress's authority, or the entire structure of belief that held the palace together. Even poetry played along. Verses hinted that the mirror could separate jade from clay, virtue from corruption. One poet wrote of a reflection so clear it burned lies away, while another mocked how even shadows learn to flatter. Through art and rumor, the mirror gained a life far beyond its physical form, and still, the heart of the matter remained hidden. Did anyone truly see their sins exposed? Or was every flicker just smoke, every shadow just suggestion? Perhaps the truth didn't matter. In the hands of empresses and eunuchs, suggestion was enough. Suggestion was power. So the mirror sat, silent and gleaming, while human ambition twisted around it like vines around a stone. And in this entanglement of faith and fear, another thread was woven, the thread of religion, where Taoist priests claimed the mirror was not only political theatre, but a vessel to glimpse spirits themselves. Incense smoke curls through the rafters. Bells chime in slow rhythm, and Taoist priests shuffle into the hall with long sleeves trailing. You and I find ourselves now at the point where palace politics merges with the supernatural. The mirror, already a weapon of intrigue, is lifted into the realm of ritual. It becomes not only an arbiter of loyalty, but a tool for banishing demons, for chasing away invisible threats that haunted both throne and subject. Taoist texts often spoke of demon-revealing mirrors. These were said to expose spirits that clung to the body, parasites of the unseen world. Hold one before your chest, and if you carried hidden corruption, be it moral or spectral, the mirror would show it. Imagine the hush as a priest raises the bronze disc high, chanting verses, while courtiers kneel. The reflection trembles in candlelight, and everyone waits to see whether the polished surface remains calm or shivers with phantoms. It's easy, of course, for us to smile. We know flickering lamps and trembling hands can turn a reflection into something eerie. Yet in a hall scented with sandalwood and alive with chanting, how easily would you doubt your senses? If you had enemies waiting for a sign of your weakness, how quickly would your nerves betray you? The mirror, placed in this sacred frame, blurred lines between faith and fear. Emperors themselves were not immune. Some records describe rituals where the ruler gazed into the mirror while priests circled him, muttering charms. To see his image remain steady was reassurance that heaven still favored him. To see it waver might plant a seed of doubt, a dangerous thought in a mind already burdened with omens and portents. In an empire where a comet could spark rebellion, what could a shivering reflection unleash? And then there were the tales of demons. A courtier whispered that, during one midnight rite, a servant's reflection twisted into a horned figure. He was dismissed at dawn, never seen again. Another story claims that a mirror once showed a fox spirit crouched behind an official, revealing him as an imposter in human form. Belief in shapeshifters and restless ghosts was common, and the mirror fit neatly into this framework. The court did not laugh. It trembled. But perhaps most fascinating is how these rituals reinforced the mirror's political weight. If the priests supported what the reflection supposedly revealed, it was harder to contest. Religion wrapped politics in sacred cloth. The mirror was no longer just a palace toy. It was validated by heaven's intermediaries. To question it was to question the Taoist rites themselves. Even beyond the palace, commoners heard of these ceremonies. They imagined a gleaming bronze disc capable of warding off evil, and they hung their own small mirrors at doorways, convinced the polished surface could repel spirits. Here the legend escaped the gilded walls and entered daily life. Belief spread like ripples from a dropped stone. Still, we wonder together, how much of this was sincere faith, and how much was careful staging by priests and rulers who knew the value of spectacle? Was the mirror truly a window to another realm, or simply a canvas for human hopes and fears projected in the dark? As the incense fades, the chanting subsides, and the mirror is placed back upon its stand, another question begins to glow. For if some believed too much in its power, others surely doubted. And where there is doubt, there is also deception. Scholars skeptical of miracles, collectors chasing curiosities, and clever forgers ready to sell false soul mirrors for a price. Doubt always finds its way into legend, and the soul mirror was no exception. For every courtier who trembled before its bronze face, there was a scholar raising an eyebrow, or a merchant eager to profit from its mystique. You and I step now into that space where belief collides with skepticism, where questions become louder than answers, and where forgeries thrive in the gaps left by uncertainty. Picture a scholar in a study lined with bamboo scrolls, oil lamp burning low. He holds a mirror rumored to be one of the soul-revealing kind. He tilts it this way and that, examining patterns on the back, tracing his fingers across the etched spirals. Then, With deliberate calm, he lights a candle, watching how the flame bends across the surface. When shadows dance, he nods, scribbles notes, and concludes, "This is nothing but optics." Yet when he shares his findings, courtiers scoff. For what is a rational explanation compared to a story that makes hearts beat faster? Merchants, meanwhile, saw opportunity. Tales of the palace mirror spread far beyond the capital, and soon market stalls filled with bronze discs touted as soul mirrors. Some bore fantastical inscriptions, others were deliberately flawed so that reflections looked warped, heightening the sense of otherworldly judgment. Imagine the thrill of a provincial governor purchasing such a trinket, testing his officials in private chambers, convinced he was wielding the same power as the emperor. Clever forgers laughed all the way to the counting table. Collectors, too, played their part. By the later dynasties, owning an alleged soul mirror became a mark of prestige. Families passed them down as heirlooms, claiming each bore traces of the original. Yet, when archaeologists uncovered these mirrors centuries later, many turned out to be ordinary bronzes beautifully crafted. Yes, but no more magical than a polished gong. And still, the legend persisted. Isn't it curious how people cling to stories even when evidence wavers? It's as if the mirror itself became a reflection not of truth but of desireth. Desire to believe, to control, to be part of something extraordinary. To own such a mirror was to hold a piece of mystery in your hands, even if the mystery existed only in imagination. One anecdote tells of a governor's son who bought a forged mirror and tried to expose a corrupt tutor. The mirror, naturally, showed nothing unusual. But word spread that the tutor's image had darkened, and soon the man was disgraced. The object had no magic, yet the rumor alone destroyed a career. This is where skepticism meets irony. Even a fake mirror could wield real consequences if people chose to believe. For the palace itself, skepticism posed a delicate problem. If too many doubted, the mirror's authority would crumble. And so the court maintained silence, never confirming, never denying. Ambiguity kept the legend alive. The less that was explained, the more people filled gaps with imagination. You and I might ask, was there ever a single, true soul mirror? Or was every tale, every artifact, every forgery part of a collective performance, repeated generation after generation until it hardened into history? As scholars debated, as forgers profited, as families clutched heirlooms, the mirror's shadow lengthened. And in that shadow, a new chapter began, experiments not of politics or faith but of light itself. Candle flames, hidden etchings, and the play of optics would bring the legend closer to something we might understand today, and yet still leave a sliver of the inexplicable. A single flame trembles in the dark, and with it, a mystery is reborn. Scholars of later dynasties, skeptical yet fascinated, began to experiment in secret. They would place an ancient mirror upon a stand, dim the chamber, until only one candle remained, and then lean close to observe. You and I can almost see it, the glow bending across polished bronze, shapes appearing where none should be, as if the surface itself had learned to breathe. This was the world of magic mirrors, where designs carved on the back seemed to leap forward into the reflection. Modern science calls it an optical effect. Variations in thickness and tension from the casting process cause faint images to emerge when struck by light. But to those watching centuries ago, it felt as though conscience itself had taken visible form. How could a mirror show dragons or inscriptions, unless some force beyond human craft intervened? Imagine the thrill of a scholar who adjusted his lamp and suddenly saw patterns bloom across the wall, cloud scrolls, hidden words, or even what looked like faces. He might whisper to his students, "See, the mirror knows." Even if he could reason it away by physics, the awe remained, because sometimes knowledge does not erase wonder, it only deepens it. Accounts tell of courtiers who borrowed such mirrors to stage private revelations. A trusted ally might be shown a glowing inscription promising loyalty. A rival could be unsettled by the sudden appearance of shifting shadows. Was it science? Was it sorcery? In that candlelit chamber, who could tell the difference? What makes these experiments so enchanting is the way they blur the line between explanation and experience. We, sitting here centuries later, may nod at the logic of metallurgy and optics. Yet imagine yourself alone at night, the only light a wavering flame, and suddenly the surface before you seems to whisper secrets. Wouldn't your pulse quicken, no matter how rational you thought you were? Some scholars even recorded their attempts in poems, describing the mirror as a moon that sang under fire, or a pool that revealed shadows of the heart. These were not dry observations, but lyrical confessions of wonder. Even in their skepticism, they could not resist the lure of mystery. And so the mirror lived on in a dual form, as an artifact of science and as a vessel of imagination. Each experiment proved something measurable, yet each also left space for the unmeasurable, the part of us that longs to believe. As the candle gutters and smoke curls toward the rafters, you and I are left with the sensation that the mirror was never only about optics or politics. It was about the human need to see ourselves more clearly, to believe there is a surface somewhere that will not lie. And that brings us to our final reflection, where myth, memory, and meaning converge. What the mirror truly shows, not just in bronze, but in us. At last we arrive at the heart of the legend. After centuries of whispers, tests, and experiments, what did the soul mirror truly reveal? You and I can almost feel the weight of expectation as the polished bronze rests in its carved frame. Courtiers may have seen omens, priests may have glimpsed spirits, scholars may have noted tricks of light. But beneath all those layers, the mirror reflected something simpler and more enduring: the human hunger for certainty. Think of how often we long to know what others truly feel, or whether their words can be trusted. In an imperial court, where alliances shifted like sand and betrayal carried fatal cost, the desire for a shortcut to truth was overwhelming. The mirror answered that longing, not by actual magic, but by embodying the belief that truth could be seen. To gaze into it was to confront not the metal, but your own fears. If you were nervous, the candlelight exposed your tremors. If you carried guilt, the shadows seemed to magnify it. The mirror did not so much reveal souls as invite people to reveal themselves. And that is why it endured. A forgery could still ruin a career if people believed its verdict. A ritual could calm or terrify simply because the mirror stood at the center. Even centuries later, archaeologists and tourists feel a shiver when they see bronze mirrors pulled from tombs. The artifact may be ordinary, but the legend clings to it like mist. What fascinates me, and perhaps fascinates you as well, is how belief itself became the most powerful force. The mirror shows us that humans create meaning not only from what is, but from what we need. When emperors wished to assert power, the mirror obliged. When priests sought to cast out demons, it complied. When scholars demanded rational proof, it gave them patterns in the candlelight. It always reflected what was asked of it, like a stage mirror for the human heart. So, was there ever a single, original soul mirror? Maybe not. Maybe the true mirror was never an object at all, but the collective imagination of those who needed it. Perhaps the real relic was the story itself, passed from chamber to chamber, dynasty to dynasty, until it grew into a legend that outlived every emperor who once trembled before it. And as we stand here at the end of our journey, the bronze gleam fades into a softer glow. You realize the mirror has always been less about exposing others, and more about asking us to look inward. What would we see if such a mirror hung on our own walls tonight? Would it reveal ambition, kindness, envy, hope, or would it show only the shadows we carry in secret? That question lingers as the lanterns dim, leaving us with the quiet truth that sometimes myths survive not because they are factual, but because they reflect something eternal in us. And so, the soul mirror's final revelation is not about emperors or eunuchs, but about the timeless human wish to be known. The palace is quiet now. The mirror, whether real or imagined, rests in darkness. You no longer feel the press of officials or the weight of whispered judgment. Instead, the corridors empty into stillness, and the echoes of all those stories soften into memory. As you lie back, imagine the bronze surface fading into a pool of calm water. The ripples slow. The reflection is no longer a test or a threat, but simply a gentle shimmer, like moonlight on a pond. The questions of truth and legend drift away, leaving only the comfort of knowing that stories, like dreams, can cradle us without demanding answers. Your breathing steadies. The air cools, as though the palace doors have opened to the night. Lanterns sway in a soft breeze, their glow dimming, their shadows lengthening across the floor. Each moment stretches a little longer, words flowing slower, until they feel like the hush before sleep. The mirror no longer judges, it no longer gleams with suspicion or awe. It is only quiet bronze, a companion to silence. And perhaps that is its truest gift, not to expose or accuse, but to remind you that even in mystery, there can be peace. Let the last trace of candlelight fade. Let your thoughts loosen, like silk slipping from your shoulders. The palace dissolves into the background, the mirror dissolves with it, and you remain safe, calm, drifting. Now, allow yourself to rest. The story is finished, and all that remains is the gentle rhythm of night carrying you onward.